You're listening to an encore presentation of the Downright Upright Show with Philip Anthony.
Hello, listeners, and welcome to the Downright Upright Show, the place to go to hear out loud and proud what Minnesotans are thinking. And I am your host, Philip Anthony. I'm so glad that you could join us today, and I hope you're all doing fantabulous. And fantabulous is my word for fantastic, and fabulous put together, it's twice as nice. Okay, it's my little quirky thing. My special guest today is LGBTQ plus advocate, writer, and author of the book Getting to Ellen, a memoir about love, honesty, and gender change, and the radio host of the AM 950 talk show Ellie 2.0 Radio, Ellie Krug. Welcome, Ellie, to the Downright Upright Show.
I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's an amazing, amazing honor to have you. I am a big fan, and I am a little nervous.
Don't be nervous. It's all right.
Okay. So before we begin, I identify as gay, and my pronouns are he and him. And would you like to share how you identify on the LGBTQ plus spectrum?
Yeah, well, I even though I'm trans, I identify as female, and she and her pronouns.
Okay, good. Thank you for that. Before we talk about your fascinating career, would you like to tell the audience a little bit about your beginnings, like the early part of your life's journey? So, for example, I know that you came from Newark, and I was born in Brooklyn. So can you talk about those early days for us?
Yeah, we got this East Coast thing going on.
Yeah, we got a connection.
You got your accent, and if people listen carefully, they'll hear mine.
Do you say talk and walk and coffee?
I say wash. I'm going to go wash the car.
Okay.
I did grow up in New Jersey, and when I was 11, my family, my father was relocated by his company to Cedar Rapids, and so for me growing up, and I grew up in a lower blue collar neighborhood in New Jersey in Sayreville, home of John Bon Jovi, I might note, and
okay.
and we moved to Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and overnight transported to upper middle income. Brand new house, my own bedroom. It was just something else.
Okay.
But it was a different world, okay? And so I went from a neighborhood where probably the aspiration was the military or trade school to a neighborhood where, of course, you're going to college, kind of thing. And along the way, I developed an incredibly good work ethic, such that when I was a senior in high school, I was working 40 hours a week and getting some work study for it, of course, but hardly going to class, but I still graduated,
We all did that, though.
Yeah. Well, but that was in the days,
yeah.
Philip, when you could actually save money and pay for college.
Oh, well, true. Yeah.
And so, even at a $2.50 job, I was able to save enough money to pay for a year and a half of college. So, so there's that.
Was the transition for you to Iowa difficult, or were you too young to even realize?
No, it was difficult. It really was. It was just a way different place. So
going from the city life to more, I guess, the country mouse to the city mouse.
Yeah, well, you could see cornfields from my bedroom window in Cedar Rapids. So, we didn't have that where I lived in New Jersey.
Let's go into your life's journey here, because you have a very interesting life's journey. Our listeners will find this out. Can you tell the listeners about your life's journey from your early years through your gender journey and into your LGBTQ plus experience? So that whole process, how was that? Because I know mine was very difficult, and I'm sure yours was just because we're from this similar generation. So it must have been hard for you just like it was for me.
Well, throw in top of it that I was living in, Iowa.
Right.
Very conservative, religious kind of place, but not nearly as bad as it is right now.
True, yeah.
So I'm growing up before Stonewall, and then Stonewall occurs.
Yes.
But I started having, gender issues. I mean, something was going on with me, as an young adolescent, but really when I was 11 years old is really the time that it all sort of cemented. And I'm not very proud of it, but, one day I went into my sister's bedroom when no one was home, trust me, and opened the drawer to her underwear drawer and stripped off my boy clothes and put on the prettiest pair of panties and camisole with little yellow flowers. I still remember them. And standing in front of the mirror from sideways to the back, I looked like a girl, and I just remember the electricity that went through my body. I had thought for a long time, a very long time, that this was just a phase, something I would grow out of. In 1969, early 70s, the idea that your brain didn't match your body and that you could do anything about it, I mean, it was like, are you kidding? What are you talking about? And so I really did think it would go away. I happened to have the good luck and I was a jock. I mean, nobody had any idea that my gender identity, as it was forming, was not consistent with my outward appearance. And I got very lucky and fell in love with a girl when I was in high school. I was a freshman. She was a sophomore, and she turned out to be my soulmate. And I tried to tell her about what was going on in my head around gender, and she freaked out. And I learned at that moment two important things about life. First, I learned that if I ever let anybody know what was going on in my head, that I would lose them.
Yeah.
Anybody who's LGBTQ right now knows exactly what I just said. And the second thing I learned was that I was going to be a pretty good trial lawyer, because in that conversation I changed the subject and she went for it.
I was a paralegal, actually, before I was a flight attendant.
Oh, my goodness. Good for
you.
you.
We're marching down the same road,
We
I
are.
think.
We are. Well, do you like panties with little yellow flowers on them?
Well, I have a similar story, though. But I was around the time of I Am Woman, Hear Me Roar.
Helen Reddy.
And I remember this like it was yesterday. One day, my mom had a wig. She only had it because like sometimes she would go out and she wanted to look fancy.
Yeah.
So I put this wig on, and I took a brush and I played the record, and I was in the mirror singing this, and she caught me, and I knew I wasn't supposed to do that.
Oh no! An early dash to your drag career.
My drag days, But the thing was about it was that. It wasn't that I didn't like my body, because I know what the trans experience is. What the gay experience is, I wanted to be the girl that every boy wanted. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It was so weird to me, and I knew I was different from that time. But my mother always said to me, "Don't do that again. Boys are going to make fun of you, and it's not right." And so I kept it suppressed after that day.
Yeah.
So it was.
Well,
and then of course I went through all the. Making fun of and being treated like, horribly, and yeah.
Well, I was able to hide pretty well. So, I mean, and I suppressed. But, I was a jock.
I wasn't.
Yep. Nope. I was a jock and had short hair, long hair and then short hair. But, I mean, nobody ever... When I eventually came out at age 52, I mean, people were shocked because they had no idea.
Were you popular in school too?
Yeah, I hung out with the popular guys. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Absolutely. Yeah.
See, I was not. I was the one kid that they beat the hell out of.
Well,
because I was Brooklyn. It's very macho. Guidos are living there, and I just didn't fit.
Well, I mean, I certainly was bullied in high school, but. I think that they were bullying me. Maybe, I don't know, maybe they picked something up, but I mean, I think that they were just bullying me because they just thought they could do it. And they did. They did do it. But
you had a sharp tongue to get them back, though, right?
It was just some endurance. So I learned a lot about enduring things.
Yeah,
okay?
I shut up. I let them say whatever they wanted because I was too afraid,
Yeah, no. I mean, no. But, I mean, my experience with being bullied is far less than for many people. But yes, I was popular. I became best friends with the 8th grade quarterback. I was the frontline guard on the 8th grade football team, and he and I are still best friends. Still very very best friends. He's like my brother. We talk several times a week on the phone.
That is so nice.
I just drove out to Utah over Christmas to see him. So,
It's funny. I was just talking about. I'm going off on a tangerine here a little bit, but allies. Okay, LGBTQ plus allies are so important in the because we keep thinking about each other, but if we didn't have those allies to help us out and to back us up and support us, right? I mean, you have this quarterback. You said he was. He's probably like this big guy. And
he's a hunter. He likes to go out and hunt and kill things, and
yeah.
You would think that the two of us would not be best friends, but
well, that's what I'm saying.
But he's got a soft heart, and
good for him.
And he and I together have been through some things, and no, he just never left me, and my brother never left me. My brother Mark. I told Mark that I really was a chick and not a dude. A couple of years before I even came out to the world, and he was pronoun proper when we were private, and he was calling me sis right away. I mean, my brother just unbelievable. And Thap, that's my best friend. His last name is Tharp, but I kind of murdered it, and so his nickname is Thap, Thap.
Okay.
And I write about him in my book. I write about both my brother and Thap in my book. But he never hesitated. He just never. He didn't care. I came out first as gay because I thought maybe I was just a gay man with a panty fetish. That didn't work. Quickly, I understood that I was really not a gay man. But he didn't care about that, And then when I shifted and said, "Well, I think I'm a chick," he's like, "I don't care." And really not. And he just never, ever wavered. And he'll still trip up on the pronouns every once in a while. And I'm like, Thap, after all these years, he's still doing that, But
the love is there, though.
Oh, my God. Are you kidding me?
The love is incredible.
If you can think about the quarterback and the frontline guard 52 years later saying, "I love you," when we end our phone calls. I mean, if you can, if you
that's
can,
beautiful.
It's platonic. I mean, he's married and he's got kids, and I would never date that guy. He's too controlling. But and he knows that. He knows how I feel. So
right.
But no, you're right about allies, and I think that our certainly our younger people, who are in many ways much luckier, because it's a far more accepting society. That's a very broad statement, because in a lot of places it's not accepting. A lot of families are rejecting and not accepting. I understand that. But I think that our younger people still need allies just like everybody else. It may be a little bit easier for them to find them, but I don't know. And I talk to I work a lot with younger LGBTQ plus people, and they have some of the same challenges that I had growing up, and that also fuels why I want to help them.
Yeah, and I my last podcast I was interviewing JP Der Bogohosian, and we were talking about how today there are schools where you can go to a safe place, for example, for an LGBT club.
Yeah.
Like a high school.
Yeah, GSA, Gay Straight Alliance, or Gender Sexuality Alliance. Yep.
Exactly.
That's who I go and speak to those.
And that shocks me because I would never have imagined that growing up in my day. Because like I said, I'm 62 years old. I grew up with a lot of homophobia, and being gay was like they just beat you up. You were worthless.
Well, you and I both grew up when the word queer was a weapon.
It was a weapon,
Yes. But today it's an identity. I mean, our younger people are like, "Hey, just call me queer," and I think it's wonderful.
But the F-A word was my worst word.
Yeah, well, and that's still a slur.
And it's still a slur.
Yeah, that's still a slur.
I'm not. That word gives me. I go crawl into a ball. I can't handle that word still to this day when I hear it.
Yep.
It makes me sad, and it makes me feel diminished as a person, because I feel like, I'm actually in the best place I've ever been in my life.
Oh.
And so have you. So are you, I'm sorry. And I have a husband that loves me, and I'm, in a really good place. But I finally grew into my skin because it was hard growing up like that, and coming here to Minnesota. And I have to say this, I keep being a cheerleader for Minnesota, but I came here and I've got nothing but support since I've been in this state. I just love it.
Well, it's interesting. I do a lot of speaking, and I was at a community church on Wednesday night speaking about the injustice that the LGBTQ community, but particularly young transhumans, are facing. And part of the discussion was about how special Minnesota is. I mean, I told the audience on Wednesday night that what's happening is we're creating this ocean of red with oases of blue, islands of blue. And, in the upper Midwest, the island is Minnesota. You go a little bit east, you got Illinois as an island. And then after that, we got to go all the way to Jersey. Really.
Jersey, okay. New York.
We're New York, upstate New York. I mean, but
California.
Well, that's the other direction, between us and California's Colorado. Okay,
yeah.
but then but after that, we're on the West Coast. And as I said on Wednesday night, that those who are marginalizing our community and other communities, because they're also marginalizing people of color, people who are born in places outside the U.S., they're marginalizing, that they're just so short-sighted because our younger people, even if they're not LGBTQ, they want to be in a place where diversity and inclusion are core values. They want to live in neighborhoods where it's different, where it's not all the same people.
Right here, I love that.
What's going to happen, and what's happening, I believe, is that the Blue Islands are going to benefit. We're going to get an influx of people who are going to happen to be the smartest and the brightest, who are going to come and want to be here and plant their roots because they know they are protected, or the people they love are protected. Mm-hmm. It is so short-sighted by those who would seek to marginalize us and pass these. I mean, you can get me started. I mean, we literally have dozens of state actors, of official governmental machinery directed against a group of humans, LGBTQ plus, but particularly trans young humans, passing laws. Laws to take away your right to play sports, your right to use the facility that aligns with your gender identity, your right to medical care. We have states passing laws saying, no, young transgender humans, you can't do any of that.
Florida.
Oh,
that's a joke down there. It's a joke.
But it is. But nobody is yelling about it.
Mm.
It's
because
it's appalling.
Again, it goes back to the ally thing. When you can see as a person that group is being discriminated against or mistreated in any way, you can either go, help the person out and understand that their humanity, or you can say, well, that's an other.
Yep.
And other them, like African Americans, the same thing. They in Florida. AP African American history is now being questioned as a subject in schools, in high school. And to me, why just them? What that's overt racism. If you ask me,
no, it's
right. Awful.
No, it is, and while it may garner some votes today. I think it's just tremendously short-sighted, and I don't know. But for my community, for particularly young trans people, it is. I don't want to use the word genocide because that is just too strong. Because I don't want false equivalencies. But it is targeted discrimination, causing a whole entire community to feel as if they are lesser in our society.
No, exactly.
And that has tremendous ramifications.
Yes. It's again, othering.
Yep.
And I was speaking about this on a previous podcast. I was talking about the Republican way of getting butts to the polls. I think they use this as a way to motivate their voters. I mean, it's sad to think about that. Why would hate bring people to the polls? But it's working for them.
Yeah, love is not as much of a motivating factor as
anymore.
As hatred is.
Willie Horton ads. Remember during the 80s and 90s when they just show a black face and he killed somebody, and then all of these.
Dukakis,
Yeah. So there's a lot of that still happening in 2023. And that's why I say marginalized people have to look at each other and say, if we don't have each other's back, they're going to come for you, then they'll come for me, and then everybody else right after that. So I think that's where that coalition comes in. I think that's why the Democrats seem to be doing a lot better. I think electorally, I'm speaking about, because I think. They see they're coming after this person, they're coming after that person, and everybody's coalescing into no, I'm not taking this. I'm not. I mean, look at women, or childbearing humans, as you referred to them. I mean, they only states that they can have their reproductive freedom and health care is in blue states. They don't have the same freedoms as people in red states.
Nope, and and it's. I mean. No, it's pretty unbelievable. It really is. And this is why I do my work. Where my work should be is in all of those red states. I'd love to get invited to go and speak in those red states. I really would. Mm-hmm. Because I just got done doing a podcast with Stephanie Glaros from One Small Step. Take a Small Step, which is a StoryCorps initiative about getting people, one person and another person who are opposing views, to sit down and talk to each other. And as she related, and as I believe even before hearing from her, that once we can just understand that we have things in common, that we're all human, we're all attempting to survive the human condition.
Yes.
We're not going to grab everybody, but we will grab far, far, far more people than what we ordinarily would by just being in our respective camps, lobbing things at each other. So
I would love to interview someone that has different views than I do. I think it would because I don't believe in getting vile and mean, and I just think if you talk about the issues and just say, look, you see me, I'm a person.
Right.
I don't want your children. I don't want to take over your state or your beliefs, or all I want to do is live in peace.
Right.
If you want to live, under your whatever religion you happen to be, I don't have a problem with you that way. So why can't we just see each other eye to eye and work it out as two human beings?
No, and you know, so maybe you've got some listeners who know somebody that might be willing to come and be on your show,
Yeah, maybe you can help me out if you know anybody.
Well, I'm going to grab them before you, so just so you know.
Yeah, you can have them, yeah. Okay, so let's move on to, now I've listened to your show quite a few times, and I discovered you're very proud of your work as an idealist. Mm-hmm. I love that word.
Thanks.
And would you explain in your own words to the listeners what that word means to you?
So, sure. So Ellie 2.0 Radio, the show that you're speaking of, mm-hmm. is about idealism and idealists. People working. An idealist, in my view, is someone working to try and make the world better. But yeah, I mean, you got to work for it. It's not like in your head, I want it to be better, and it's not something you fit in between yoga and takeout sushi. It's really something that you have to work on every day. And,
yes.
And I was, and you're not too far away from me, but you may not have been doing this at the time. I mean, I started reading the newspaper when I was 7 in Jersey. And even though my family was on the lower end of things, they still got 2 newspapers. In the morning, it was the Daily News, and in the evening, it was the Star-Ledger.
I read the Daily News.
And at first it was the comics, but eventually I migrated towards, the big stories and the opinion page. And so by the time, and Dr. King and Bobby Kennedy were both in the news quite a bit. I mean, they were all over the place. They were on TV. And before they went, And I don't know how, because my family was not political. My family was not involved. My family wasn't a family of volunteers, wasn't a family of, we're going to go support the nonprofit downtown or across town and do the meals. And but somehow their words, Dr. King's and Bobby's words, sank into me. They did, and they caused me to believe that I have an obligation to make the world better. And so when they were murdered, when I was 11 in April and June of '68, by then I had already thought I was going to be a lawyer. And I first wanted to be an environmental lawyer to go and change the world and protect the environment, because I went through the very first Earth Day. I was in seventh grade.
I remember those. Yeah,
the very first one, and so that's why I went to law school, to become an environmental lawyer. It did not work out that way, because I did some suppressing of my gender identity, and it's hard to have part of you that's authentic, which is my idealism, show up, but not all of you. So all of that got put on hold till I transitioned genders, and then at age 52 in 2009, when I transitioned, I lost my law firm. I could have rebuilt it, but I didn't want to. And instead, I wanted to go and be a idealist. And so I've been doing that. I've been doing an idealistic work, trying to change the world since 2009.
That's beautiful. You're a beautiful soul. I mean, when you think of all the things you could have done, because like you said, you were interested in environment, and you went into idealism, which is in itself. Imagine if everybody thought that way, what kind of a change the world would be. So, what do you think of the hurdles? What do you think the hurdles are in today's society for younger people discovering their authentic gender? And how would you compare that to discovering one's true self later in life, as you did? So in other words, you came into yourself later in life. Now there are kids today that are really young, and they're discovering themselves earlier. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think that, for our younger people, the reason that we're seeing more and more young LGBTQ people is not because straight boys just see two men kiss and they think, well, I'm going to try and do that. It's simply because our younger people are seeing more humans living as who they truly are, and they're getting braver earlier. And so we're just seeing more and more of that, and they're being supported. Now this is all geography, based. In the rural areas, it's far more of a challenge to come out and be who you are.
I'll say, yeah.
So I think that it's just, you see people living authentically, and you're like, well, I'm going to go and be brave and do that too. I have a saying that human authenticity will not leave you alone until you listen to it. Now, whether that's about gender or sexuality, or whether it's about you being a writer or a musician or an actor or a crafter or whatever, a hiker, whatever, authenticity shows up in a whole lot of ways. And if you suppress it, if you have this thing inside you saying you need to do this in order to feel whole, and if you suppress it, you're like, no, I'm not going to do it. Mom and Dad said I have to be an accountant. I can't be an artist, or I can't go and be an actor. They've told me I have to be an accountant. Well, that person may go on and go become an accountant, but they'll be miserable because their psyche, their gut, their heart will tell them, no, you need to be on the stage. Mm-hmm. And some people get brave and listen to this authenticity even later in life, and they pivot. Some people don't, and they lay on their deathbeds. There was a study, we're talking 15, maybe even more years, that a hospice nurse in England did a story that said the top 5 regrets of the dying. And the regret number 1 was, I didn't live a more authentic life. So this isn't just about LGBTQ people, it's about all humans. Mm-hmm. That we suppress our authenticity, we don't feel whole, we feel less than whole, and that creates all kinds of problems for us. Mm-hmm. It really does.
Well, I spent many years being an inauthentic person, and I can't tell you, Ellie, how many people I hurt girls, for example. Like I wanted to fit in, so I just said, well, maybe I should, everybody's trying to push me to date girls, maybe, and how many hearts I broke because, they start to like you and, and they get attached and then you just dump them because deep inside that's not you and you're hurting these people.
Yeah.
And in many other ways, just lying about yourself all the time. I just had enough of it. And I finally going to college woke me up. Hunter College in Manhattan.
Well, you're lucky to have gotten
the most liberal college.
Well, you're lucky to have gotten it figured out that early. I mean, I broke the heart of the person I loved the most in the whole wide world, my soulmate, my at that point my wife. And I broke the hearts of 2 daughters, one of whom I lost, but she came back when we're all good. But I broke the heart of my sister, who I lost, but she came back, thankfully. But yeah, you're right. And all of this is about surviving the human condition. We all have a variety of different challenges.
Yes.
But I had to learn, I really do believe human authenticity will not leave you alone until you listen to it.
Absolutely. My mother used to say to me, it's not who you lost, it's who came back.
That was very sweet.
Because I did lose people. But then some, like you said, came back.
Yep.
And I lost friends at the beginning when I finally said, well, the hell with this. I'm gonna shout it from the highest mountaintop and say, this is me. And, I did lose some people along the way, but there were people that came back.
Right.
And that's what mattered to me, that they mulled it over in their brain and they said, you know what, Philip's a nice guy. He's not any different than he was before he told me. And they felt that they lost a good friendship. Yep. So, yeah. All right. Well, now let's talk about your book. Okay. This is a very interesting book. It's called Getting to Ellen, which is your real name, right?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Getting to Ellen, a memoir about love, honesty, and gender change. And can you walk us through what led you to writing the book and how this book might help many of us in the LGBTQ plus community, including yours truly here?
Well, so the book is so just for the record, Ellen is my legal name. The Strib, no matter the fact that everybody calls me Ellie, I'm sure that when I go, the Strib there'll be an obituary in the Strib and they'll call me Ellen. The book is a memoir, and it's just essentially my story of suppressing and thinking and trying to do everything I could to stay a man because I really, really love my wife, and I did not want to lose her. I did not want to lose either of my children, and I also didn't want to lose my law practice, which was very, very successful in Iowa, and I didn't want to, lose the big house and all kinds of stuff. And so it's a story about. So the reader, I take them on a journey, okay, and the memoir is what's called a braided memoir. So there are 2 stories in the memoir. One story is about my father, who committed suicide in 1990 when I was 33 years old.
I'm sorry.
And so it's the story about his suicide and the aftermath of having to deal with that suicide and its effect on me and my family. And then but my father was also an alcoholic, and that came into play that affected me even to this day. But the other story is about, me grappling with my gender identity and finally coming to a moment where I had a moment of truth and realized that unless I listened to this thing inside me, unless I listened to my authenticity, that I would lay on my deathbed and think of myself as a coward. I'd have all the love in the world, no doubt, and I'd probably be a millionaire several times over by the time I got there to my deathbed. But I was very clear on one night, which happened to be the night of 9/11. It became very, very clear to me that none of that would matter. None of that love, none of that money, none of that would matter. The only thing that would matter to me on my deathbed was that I knew that I was somebody else, and I hadn't been brave enough to live my life as me. Whatever that me, it's still pretty fuzzy what me was going to be. And that was just too unacceptable for me. And so the book details that moment of truth, and then, the subsequent me coming out and finally getting to be me and live as Ellie Krug with, right now your listeners are thinking that I'm probably about 6'4" with a frame of, 250 pounds, and the reality is, because of this voice, the reality is I'm about 5'8", size 4 to 6 dress, depending on the store, but nobody,
Well, what captivates me about you, and I think it's because it's my it sounds like you're speaking my personal journey. I lost my dad. He died, was actually murdered.
Oh, my God. Philip, I'm so sorry.
Came home. The cops came to the door. And I was 4.5 years old. And I'm sorry, ma'am, but we found your husband, and he got shot in the head, and 1 bullet, and he was dead. So I grew up without a father.
No.
And then the alcoholism came later because my mother remarried an alcoholic who was abusive.
Okay.
So my self-esteem was down the tubes because he just, first of all, he saw I was a gay little boy, and that didn't match his image. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Like he wanted to send me to the baseball field, and I wanted to stay home and play house with the girls, So it was tough. And when I hear your stories, it kind of like I feel like from the same part of the world, in the East Coast. It's fascinating. I have to definitely. I skimmed. I have to. Full disclosure. I skimmed through the book quickly before the interview, but
don't worry about it.
I am going to read that book again, and because it's so pertinent to everybody that had that journey.
Well, we should let everybody know the book's available on Amazon, Kindle, or Nook, or your local bookstore will order Getting to Ellen.
Exactly. Yep. And I'll repeat the book's name again at the end of the show. And I think we have a link, kind of, right? Every show has they put little links next to it that we can get the book and stuff. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So as most LGBTQ Minnesotans know, Lavender Magazine is the preeminent publication for our community. And can you talk about your column, Skirting the Issues, which received a gold medal award for excellence from the Minnesota Magazine and Publishing Association in 2013. Now, I read Lavender ever since I moved to Minnesota, and I remember reading your column. So could you talk about that just very briefly, if you can?
Yeah, so I started writing for Lavender in 2012, I believe. They had a transgender writer, but, they had a couple. One who really didn't write about anything that was transgender related, and the other, I don't exactly know what the whole story was, but I wanted to write about what it meant to, Skirting the Issues, the title is, about what it meant to live life as a trans woman who doesn't pass because this voice doesn't match the appearance. And, and the column was, monthly, and it was filled with a lot of stories. One of my favorites was a column I published in, I think, December of 2018 titled Hope, about an experience I had in San Francisco where one of my trainings had caused somebody to really believe that maybe our country could get past its divisions. But I will tell you, I don't write for Lavender anymore. They became upset. That would be the right word. Because my columns were, quote-unquote, too political and had become, quote-unquote, too political. Now, what I was doing was writing about the need to protect our young LGBTQ plus youth. And I was writing about how those protections were becoming far more difficult, especially outside of Minnesota. And so the publisher, I think, was afraid that... And then 2 of my columns showed up in a conservative blog, quoting my columns, a conservative blog that did a story about the fact that the Minnesota National Guard had, a contract with Lavender for $70,000 or $80,000 worth of ads to recruit LGBTQ soldiers, but this conservative blog was criticizing the National Guard for having that kind of a contract, and they used me as an example of how outlandish Lavender magazine was. So it came the time where I was forbidden from writing anything quote-unquote political. And I was told that Lavender magazine is just a lifestyle magazine. It's not a political magazine. And my view is, if you're LGBTQ in America right now, I think it's a little hard not to be political. So I resigned from Lavender. I would note for the record that in the most recent election that we had, gubernatorial election, that Lavender, even though Lavender magazine did not want to be political, that the back cover of Lavender magazine, at least on one issue, if not more, was a full-page ad by the Republican candidate for governor. Full-page ad.
In Lavender magazine?
In the back page of Lavender, he and his running mate, who were not particularly LGBTQ-friendly people.
Oh, my goodness.
Lavender magazine carried that. This magazine that did not want to be political. So,
wow.
That's
just shocking me now, because
well,
I didn't think that was the case. I would
go online and see if you can grab the issues from
oh my goodness.
October and November. I don't know if it was more than one issue. I know it was certainly one because I saw it.
Well, you're right about the. If I may add something, you're right about the fluff. That Lavender is more like, like you said, oh, this club is having this drag show and this club is doing that. And it's really not about the crisis. And that's the word I like to use when it comes to our community. I mean, they're shooting up clubs, drag shows. And I don't know how you could call that political if people are dying and people are being hurt by this. So I don't know.
And young LGBTQ kids are killing themselves, because of oppression and marginalization and bullying and all of that stuff. At any rate, so my relationship with Lavender ended. I resigned. Mm-hmm. And, I wish them luck as a, lifestyle and leisure magazine.
It's like People magazine for gays, I guess, right?
Apparently.
Yeah. Oh, geez.
Except when candidates coming with money to, have their political ads.
Right. Oh, geez. Well, if I would have known that, I probably would have brought it up. So before we get to the shift, I think you've listened to the show before. I have a part of the show where I shift the questioning to current events.
Sure.
Would you like to share one or two of your favorite interviews that you've conducted, whether on Iowa Public Radio, NPR, Ellie 2.0 Radio, that impacted you so profoundly that you'd like to share it with our listeners?
Oh, geez. I wish you had told me about this coming in. Because I don't remember all the names, unfortunately.
You can talk about the issue that came up.
Well, I had her name was Dana, Danna. I think it was Dana Nelson. It was an interview I did last year. She was dying of cancer. She was in her mid-30s. She had been dealing with cancer for a number of years, and she had become an advocate for end of life, medically assisted end of life. And I'm a proponent of that as well. I don't believe that people should ever. I think people should have the ability to control when they turn the lights out. And I will. But she was so just so magnificent. I think that would be the right word. Throughout the interview, persevering, not bitter. Wise, and I had asked her what was her favorite song, and it was a song by Tame Impala, and I'm not recalling the name of the song, but as she said that, I pointed to Brett Johnson, our wonderful producer, and he found the song, and we played that as an outtake at the end of the interview. And but I got done with that interview, and I just started sobbing. I could not stop crying. I was sobbing. And
actually, a lot of your interviews, you've become very emotional.
Yeah.
You always bring me to tears too when I listen to your interviews.
I think sometimes it's like, I've got to be
You're
a little bit stronger than...
You're an empathetic person, and that's nothing wrong with that.
But that interview, I mean, you asked, that interview was...
Yes.
And then she died. She died within the last 2 or 3 months. She died, and I talked about it, and we played the Tame Impala song again for her.
Oh.
So, I do get emotional, and it's, and it's probably highly unprofessional, but
no,
it's
don't say
just,
that.
it's just,
it's human. You always talk about being a human, right?
It is, and I am incredibly lucky to have this show. I'm incredibly lucky to, I still write for Minnesota Women's Press. I'm incredibly lucky, to have a newsletter that goes out once a month to 9,000 people.
Right.
And they, the open rate on the newsletter is approaching 50%, which is just kind of unbelievable for any kind of a mass mailing.
Right.
And, and then I get to do the work where I get to stand in front of people and talk. And I know that I'm incredibly, incredibly lucky to get to do that. And sometimes it's just overwhelming, the gratitude that I have over it. But at the same time, it's always a feeling it's never enough, that there's so much more to do.
And there is.
And that if only this or that could happen, maybe instead of standing and speaking to 20 people, maybe I'd be speaking to 1,000 people. And it's not about aggrandizement whatsoever. It's not about like, oh, my God, the great Ellie Krug. No, not at all. It's about the work. It's about the words. Because I do believe, all of those countless hours I spent in courtrooms learning how to be a lawyer, and trust me, there were a lot of mistakes I made in the courtroom, trust me. But all of that gave me the tools to be able to connect with humans. Effective lawyering, that's all it is just being able to convince a jury that what you're saying is true. And the work that I do is pretty easy because it is all true. We are all attempting to survive the human condition. We all do need to have greater compassion for others and ourselves. Okay, all right, I'll stop. What next do you have here?
No, again, you're a very empathetic person. I admire you.
Thanks.
I wish many more people. Talk show hosts have some. How could you be a talk show host and not feel for the guest that's going through such a horrible thing? Full disclosure, I don't know if you know, I'm going through my own cancer journey as well.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I did not know that.
It came back, but as the listeners know, my prognosis is very good because they caught it early.
Good.
I did the radiation, I did the whole thing,
okay.
And I have the side effects here and there, but there are people that are not as lucky as I am, and I pray for them all the time, and I pray for their families because it takes a lot of strength to go through that. Anyway, so now we come to the part of the show I like to call the shift, where I shift the questioning away from your career, which is an amazing career, and on to current events. How's that? Is that
sure?
Will that work out? Okay, we have a few more minutes here, so let's work on some of these current event issues. As you know, this is Black History Month,
yep.
And we are hearing more and more about certain politicians trying to prevent the teaching of African American studies, the Black LGBTQ plus struggle, and their attempts to diminish the blemish that slavery was on this country. Can you share some of your thoughts about this and your feelings?
I wouldn't call slavery a blemish. I would call it a gaping wound.
A hole. Yeah,
gaping. Well, I think that we have to understand that the country continues to operate from a dynamic where white color people, I refer to white people as white color, COLOR, because most white people don't believe that their skin color is a color. They think it's normal or base. That where, the white skin color has historically been dominant. It continues to be dominant. And that people who are in power are not willing to share that power democratically. They're not willing to relinquish it. They're not willing to invite others to the table, even though it's a big table. They want to have all the seats at the table for themselves and their group. Mm-hmm. And so I think that this continues to be a problem. And the fact that, for example, in Florida, they don't want you making children uncomfortable. That's the legal standard. They don't want children to become uncomfortable by talking about our history. It's just horrible, and we have to push back against it. We really do. I mean, black people need to have white allies, and not that I'm a savior or anything like that, but I mean they need to have people who have power. And you and I, you have white skin. I've got white skin. We have power just by virtue of the skin color. Now that doesn't make white people racist. It doesn't make it just means that we don't understand, the historical ramifications of having enslaved a group of humans for, 264 years in the U.S. Mm-hmm. and then Jim Crow following for another 100 years.
Yeah, and history has not been kind to Native Americans either. Yeah. I mean, but history can't be always, lollipops and rainbows. You have to teach what really happened.
You do.
And I don't understand why a parent would object to their child learning, well, this is really what happened to the Native Americans. Yeah. This is what really happened to our African-American brothers and sisters. This is history.
Well, this is where we get into this thing about indoctrination and wokeism and all of that. And,
oh, please, I hate that word. I don't like that word. It's ridiculous.
Right, but I mean, I think that, and it's the, I mean, you and I growing up, we didn't have to contend with Fox News.
That's true.
And there wasn't an MSNBC. There was Walter Cronkite, Peter Jennings.
The fairness doctrine was in place at that time.
Huntley Brinkley, I mean, hear the news, here are the facts.
Barbara Walters.
Every once in a while they do an opinion, but it wasn't like railing at a group of humans. And so
there was the McLaughlin Report. That was like where there was the left and the right. Remember that show?
Yeah.
That was the only one I could think of that was like point counterpoint kind of thing,
But even that was respectful. I mean,
yeah,
they weren't calling each other names.
Oh God, yeah.
But I mean, hatred sells, and those who are intolerant, who lead, have realized that, and it's. But when we can get people away from all of that, and we just get people in a room to talk to each other, they realize that everybody's just pretty much like each other. I mean, we all have our challenges, but the question is getting them in the room. Mm-hmm. The question is getting Ellie Krug to stand in front of audiences to say, yeah, this voice doesn't match the appearance, but I want the same things in life that you do. I want my children to succeed. I want to love and be loved. I want to be free of physical or emotional violence, and I want 20 minutes apiece, just like you do.
Yeah.
So.
Yes. But see, again, you and I are empathetic people. We understand the plight of other people. We don't look just very insularly, if that's a word. Insularly? Is that a word?
I don't know.
I made up my own word. We don't look into ourselves and say, well, it's all about me. And what else is happening in the world doesn't concern me, so I'm not going to vote on that issue. Which to me is being in America, especially in such a melting pot, we have to be able to see each other's issues and be able to understand each other and speak as like two people would normally speak to each other with respect, and that's where we need to go.
Yep.
And now I was going to talk about the the bills that were going on with signing a slew of bills looking at to restrict and prohibit drag shows. from even existing.
Yeah.
There's also Drag Story Hour, where they have drag
libraries.
queens.
Yep.
Have a book, and it's a children's book. It's not going to be, they're not reading, Deep Throat. They're reading a regular book, and a Dr. Seuss book, for example. Why is that? Again, I know this is like beating a dead horse, but why do you think this is such a horrible thing for some of these people?
Well, because of what the intolerant leaders are saying, that, this is grooming, these are phrases that never even existed before. Grooming, that they're indoctrinating children, and there's this whole push. There's a whole push to remove, books from libraries that have anything to do other than with, I read yesterday that, Roberto Clemente's book they want to remove from the library in Florida. Yeah.
Why is that? He was a baseball player.
Yeah, well, but he writes a little bit about racism in baseball growing up.
Oh.
My God.
There you
forbid,
go. God forbid you talk about that.
You hear about
what about
that.
Jackie Robinson's book? Then they must have got rid of that too.
Who knows? And so I this is all a pushback. And what will it blow over? Yeah, assuming our country stays together. That's the big question.
Exactly. That's why I keep bringing up this ally thing.
Yeah.
We need to keep everybody that's feeling marginalized, or even those who are allies, just that understand it, stick together and vote appropriately. We have to get these people out, I remember, this is another tangerine I'm going on. I'm a flight attendant, as you know. I had Mudcat Grant on a flight. He was the first African-American pitcher for the Minnesota Twins.
Okay.
And he came on the plane in his regalia, and he told me how terrible he was treated at first when he came into the major leagues, because at that time they were transitioning into black players into the major leagues. And he had tears in his eyes, and I'll never forget that.
Yep.
This is a human being who was a very good pitcher. He was I think he was actually the first 20-game winner for the Twins, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong. Sports is not my thing. But,
mine neither.
Yeah. Okay, so I've added a question to all my shows now, because now we're moving into the political, the elections coming up next year, and now the primaries will be, imminent. I always wanted to know, pick the brain of the person sitting across from me. What do you think about who would be the nominee for the Republican Party, and who do you think would be the nominee for the Democratic Party, and why? So if you were to have a crystal ball and be able to, or you have no idea?
I don't know. A lot can happen between now and next spring, and a lot can happen between next spring and next fall. I don't know. Sorry, but I'm not going to whatever the word is, prognosticate about it. I just not.
Yeah, I've had so many different answers. Yeah. I've had somebody just recently, one of the shows, say Mike Pence, because they think he's the only one that looked like he would be calm on the stage, because everybody's kind of like, batshit crazy on that, I
don't know.
But, all right. What are your thoughts about how President Biden did a rope-a-dope and got the Republicans to agree to keep their hands off Social Security and Medicare at the State of the Union? And
I thought he was pretty good when he did that.
Wasn't that that was so ingenious? He was literally saying, oh, hey, you don't want, and everybody's going, no, they're, scoffing and making faces, and the next thing you know, he goes, oh, so we all agree here that you want to preserve it, and he got them to admit it. So
and on the way here, I heard that Rick Scott has put out a new statement saying he never intended for Medicare or Social Security to be under review. So
but that's not true. But there's a lot of
of course it's not
there is
true.
also that other senator from Utah, Senator Mike Lee, I believe his name is. They literally have him on video saying that I'm going to pull it up, Social Security up by its roots.
Yeah.
So
No,
that's
and these are people who are millionaires, and they don't need to worry about money.
Yeah.
They have no idea what it. I mean, many of our elected people have no idea what it means to be, scraping by.
So before we end the show, is there any particular political story that I haven't mentioned, or any issue that I haven't mentioned that that you would like to bring up before we close out?
No, I mean, you're a very good interviewer, Philip. So I'm just,
thank you.
You're very, very thorough. No, I just appreciate the opportunity to be on your show.
Oh my goodness!
Thanks.
I again, this is going to sound like I'm I'm not being honest here, but I am so honored that you came, because I like I said, I've been listening to your show for a really long time, and it's not only inspiring, but it makes, I know if it makes me cry and makes me think, and you get one person just to think, like, this is a person, this is a human being. I like when you say humans, can you do that one time, just like when you do that? What, could you do it once for our listeners again? Humans.
Hello, humans.
That's it.
Ellie 2.0 radio.
So, unfortunately, we've come to the end of the show. For more information about Ellie Krug, who I adore, I hope we get to see each other again, not only just in the hallway, but more down the road. I'm sure the elections coming up will be doing some work on that.
Sure.
You can follow her on Twitter at Ellie Krug, and listen to our show, Ellie 2.0 Radio, here at AM 950. And again, would like to thank you for coming to the Downright Upright show. This is a very new show. It only started in May, and I'm starting to get amazing people coming on the show. I'm not worthy.
That's great. Good for you.
And to our listeners, thank you for spending time with us today. And please stay tuned for more of the Downright Upright show in the near future. This is your host, Philip Anthony, saying ciao for now. Thank you.
Thank you.